Hello, welcome back to Watching Privacy, Episode 7, Season 2 with Brent and Raju. I am back and coming in from an international location. So I hear the show went international last week when we had Andrew in town from South Africa. So I thought I'd continue the trend. So I made my way up north to join, but I think Brent is probably on the brink of retirement wearing that shirt, but hopefully he sticks around and stays with us on this show for a little bit longer.
Hey, man, it's 90 degrees. It's the first 90-degree day in Atlanta, so I figured I'd break out the shirt. But let me just be honest. I am glad to see Tejas back because hosting the show ain't as easy as I thought it was, man. So,
Well, I mean, I think we got a good amount to dive into, so we can just jump right in, actually. Let's see here. What do we have up first? We've got this Wired report, which is actually pretty solid. A good summary of a lot of things that are happening in general. So anything that gets posted in kind of a big outlet like Wired, hopefully attention gets attracted to it. But basically, the privacy revolt, the growing demand for privacy as a service. And one of the things that they talk about here, a couple of things, they run through a couple of different examples of how businesses are tracking you. So they talk about healthcare and wearables. They talk about your phone. They talk about auto insurance companies and things that I guess everybody who watches the show, all of our loyal listeners would know about. But for new people, just kind of bringing it to the forefront is always a good thing, I think. But the best part here was kind of the first little study that they had, where it said 84% of consumers are less likely to click on an online ad, and 74% are less likely to enable location tracking. In addition, a full 89% won't do business with a company that doesn't do a good enough job protecting them online, and 76% are likely to check websites and apps for a privacy certification seal. I don't really know what a privacy certification seal is.
I know that.
Maybe we should make one. I don't know.
So what it basically is, look at who did that survey. It's by the company called TrustArc, who makes Trusty, who makes privacy certification seal. So
certification as a service.
Certification as a service, and that's precisely that. It's not like they do any in-depth research. I often wondered what's the purpose of the certification seal itself. Is the seal itself the tracker? And I pushed back significantly on their certification seal because they request that they add that seal onto a website. And I visited their website and checked out their thing. Sure enough, they have enough trackers and ad manager and all of those. So the privacy certification company isn't very privacy friendly after all.
So in other words, what you're saying is this certification is you're certified you will be tracked when you go to this site, basically.
Yeah, it's some weird crap going on. I mean, I don't want to take away from the article. I really like that article, and I really like that Wired is bringing that awareness and touching on various topics that we really talked about, entire year, last year, and whatnot. I appreciate that. Yeah. Just that, but we also have to look at these other aspects and their inbuilt biases in some of these studies.
I just have a bit of a bone to pick with the phrase privacy as a service. It feels like it should be more privacy as a responsibility, because it shouldn't be anything that needs to be additional. It should be part of whatever your company offers, product, service, whatever. It should be offered responsibly from a privacy standpoint. And I know we're probably a long time away from companies thinking like that, but it needs to start, because it's not really some kind of separate thing. It should be core to everything that you do as a company. Whatever you provide, whatever data you're supposed to be protecting, you should do it as a responsibility, not as some additional service.
I agree. I think that is the core point the article is making, which is, hey, you're a business, you're collecting that information, your users expect certain things from you, get your act together.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with that. And that is the core part. And okay, I really like that. But on the other side, I like the author. and looks like they have a research company. I visited the research company. Sure enough, they have 10 plus trackers in there. So maybe it's just me being me, but I got to point that out. If you're putting something out there, we have to practice
How
what we
to do
preach.
business well. Did they have the pop-up at the bottom of the screen that said accept all cookies?
Yeah, and I have to give them credit. They also have a decline all, which I appreciate a lot.
That's
Everybody has
nice.
that.
So that's bonus points for that. And they have 10 trackers. Along with it is an ad or Google Tag Manager, which has how many, who knows how many trackers embedded in there. But that's part of it. But I think the author makes a good point about companies taking ownership and being responsible for it, and that is the default expectations from the users, and that's a fair point.
I know you bring up, they're doing positive with, what they're going on with the certification. I think it's fair to point out this stuff, though. I think it's fair for you to point out, there's still some tracking stuff going on. You want to be able to not just say it and brand yourself over it, but you want to be able to show that you're living it too. And so I think it's, maybe some people may think it's being a stickler, but I think it's important, that they cover the bases here.
There are good solid certifications and there are shallow certifications, and I wouldn't put Trusty under the solid certifications. In other words, they don't do enough research to do it. If you pay them enough money, or at least the certification comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And if I were to issue a certification, I would do a lot of study. Look at some of these SOC 2 compliance and what. They do a thorough job and they visit every campus and everything, and they do a pretty good job in making sure that you have everything in place. So I appreciate that. You cannot put the same Trusty or some of these at the same level as that. Not even close. I think that is where just the fact that or selling that a company has a certification will not be doing justice, and the user they will think, hey, it's just yet another certified at the SOC level, but they are not doing it at the same level. They don't care about how you're doing the tracking. They don't care about how the user is being, how their information is being used. No. So that's where the privacy, as you pointed out, Brent, privacy as a service, and then as a result you get a certification. I don't think there are vendors that you can trust yet whom we can really have a badge of privacy-centric certification out there. I'm sure there will be a few that will come because of various laws that are coming up, but it is needed so that a consumer can trust them. But just having a simple certification and an image embedded on your website doesn't mean that you can trust that vendor.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a side off just maybe the privacy angle too, but I don't think selling certifications are going away anytime soon. I mean, you have like pay to play for basically every list you see out there, 30 under 30, 40 under 40, Inc. 5000, every single one of these best places to work, like, top cloud companies, every single one of these is a PR spin with a lot of cash being exchanged. And I mean, people either tend to eat it up or boast it. But I mean, when I see like someone send me an email and it says like Inc. 5000 company, and I'm like, cool, like it says something about your company, but not in the way to me that you think it says. Like it's not the same kind of thing, depending on your target audience. So that whole pay to play for certification, especially in something as sensitive as privacy, I think it's hard because obviously the company needs to be sustaining itself in some way, shape, or form. But you have to, even that privacy authority that's providing certifications has to be the most transparent about how things are being run, how it's conducting itself in order for it to gain any kind of legitimacy, right?
Yeah, and the minimum you should expect from a company like, in this case, TrustArc, is they have products that are called Privacy Platform, Privacy Central, and whatnot, and they are selling privacy product. They shouldn't be having trackers on their website.
No.
That is 101. I mean, if I were make a decision, I wouldn't even touch it in the 10-foot pole, because just looking at that alone, it tells you, the quality. So, I mean, I didn't want to attack here, but that, at least that's how That's my first impression as an end user and evaluating a product.
Yeah, the other thing I thought was a little bit weird was when I was skimming back at like the results of their article, it said 89% won't do business with the company that doesn't do a good enough job protecting them online. Who are these 89%? Because I don't think that's like an accurate number in general. Like, I mean, maybe amongst our listener group, but like not the population at large. So, I mean, the numbers like sounded very good. Like, you know, people are very aware of it, but it didn't. I think also that pushes their agenda as well because they're selling the software. But I mean, those numbers are pretty high, I think, compared to like anything that we would guess would be what the general public is probably on board with, right?
Yep.
Yeah, who's going to answer no to that? I think probably maybe the more informative way to kind of couch it is, what are you willing to give up in order to maintain your privacy? Because that, I think that tells you a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of giving up things, there was this article that came out actually from TechCrunch about India and its VPN firms unwilling to comply with new rules will have to pull out. And I mean, this paragraph itself is pretty damning, I think, in the most part. So I'll just read the whole thing out here. The Indian Computer Emergency Response Team clarified on Wednesday that virtual private server providers, cloud service providers, VPN service providers, virtual asset service providers, virtual asset exchange providers, custodian wallet providers, and government organizations have to follow this directive called cybersecurity directions. And that requires them to store customers' names, emails, IPs, KYC or know your customer records, and financial transactions for a period of 5 years. I don't know. That seems kind of like the point of using a VPN is to kind of protect yourself from a lot of this logging and storing. And here they're saying that you have to store it all. Probably not the best move here. What do you guys think?
I'm curious what's covered under cloud service providers. Does that include all SaaS vendors?
I mean, potentially. There was no like additional details in there.
I mean, because cloud service providers could be one, the Azure, AWS, Google Clouds of the world. It could be,
Yeah,
I
infrastructure
guess maybe
property.
they try to deliberately keep it vague enough to cover abroad. You
Right.
know, first thing, I'm not surprised. We have said this so many times that because every large country will try to have their own restrictions, will try to control the data, and we said that that's coming, and what we are seeing here is in action. China has their own set of rules, and China has its own internet. India is going down the same path, and I'm pretty sure Europe, now you can say Europe is also going down the same path with their regulations, and if anything, it'll silo itself a little further. So I'm frankly not surprised, and there'll be a lot of companies that will be forced to quit, and there are likely some local companies that will come up. So I'm basically expecting every region to go down this path. Don't be surprised if Brazil goes down this path. If certain countries within Europe go down, Europe go down this path. Australia, the golden age of internet, as we know it, is behind us, and thanks to the monopolies and privacy abusers and whatnot, the concept of protecting their or countries and the governments protecting their citizen information and keeping it in house is going to be increasingly prevalent, and this is yet another example of that.
Last couple of weeks, we talked about how federal agencies here in the States are actually going to the data brokers to buy just like any other company. And it sounds like this is a way to make sure there's enough data to be on the safe side that we will be able to purchase when we need it from you. It really feels like it's not about protecting; it's more about making sure they have access to what they want. And as Raju said, I think every country, they want to have as much access to the data that they want as possible. And it just feels like, once again, under the guise of privacy, it almost feels like this isn't really about privacy. It's about accumulating the data and then being able to access it whenever they
I
want
think
to.
that's a good point, Brent. There are two aspects to it. I think the way I'm seeing it is governments have a monopoly on their citizen data, and we discussed this point last week, right? And I think the real issue is, like U.S. government has requested data from local entities, and they have accumulated all of that. We discussed that in the last episode. Now, if you are the Indian government, who would you reach out for the data? If you are reaching out to the US companies, would the US companies provide that data to Indian companies? Now, if they are located in India, they get to access that information and at will. And every country will probably request that and will probably opt for that option. And that is the reason for enhancing these rules to keep the data local and whatnot. Of course, it'll be pitched as a way to protect the information. And I'm sure there are some valid reasons to, and there is probably some merit to it to protecting users' information and particularly biometric data and whatnot. And I'm sure there is that positive side to it. Because there is a positive side to it, it sells. Otherwise, it won't. So I think it will. We'll have to see, but I don't see any alternative way here. But every company, or at least every major country, will go down this path.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this TechCrunch article was a little bit different than some of the other articles I read, maybe for the clicks, because I guess, I mean, when you have these kinds of like sweeping laws, generally you'll grip onto like some subset of the law that is going to spark the most outrage, and then kind of forget about maybe the other things that could be beneficial in it. And one of the beneficial things was having to, I'm pretty sure, report on any kind of like security breaches or incidences within X number of hours, and like be able to inform your customer as soon as possible if any kind of a breach happens, and not cover things up. So I mean, I would say that would be kind of a positive aspect to it, but then it gets kind of muddled by this other aspect. So yeah, it's always hard to, one, these things are like impossible to read normally, and two, one piece gets headlined and the others kind of just don't get the same amount of attention. But yeah, I mean, generally from a privacy perspective, not so good. Maybe the government's going for a security angle, in addition to like the data hoarding angle. So it's hard to say one or the other completely.
But I think at a macro level, because every major company that has an ad-based business model, they have hoarded all that data. That really alerted every single country to basically, they want that data for themselves. And that opened the door, and that forced the government to act on this. And now, if you look at China, it has their own internet, or at least their own version of it. Now, if you look at the direction India is looking like, it'll go down this path. That's about 1/3 the population. So what will happen to some of the other countries? And they're also going down the same path. So it's just a matter of time.
Well, I mean, speaking of collecting data, I think we've got another one here. Mastercard's Pay with a Smile test is bound to rile privacy advocates. And so basically it says Amazon isn't the only one hoping you'll be willing to use biometrics to pay at the store. Mastercard has unveiled a biometric checkout program that aims to set standards for paying with scans or gestures. The company hopes to make the purchase as simple as smiling for a camera or waving your hand in front of a reader. You wouldn't risk holding up the cube by reaching for your card, phone, or watch. There's no shortages of ways to give people money nowadays, but the face might be the next one. So additional security measure or privacy invasion? What do we think?
You can trust them. It's the same company that sells financial data. So why don't you trust them with your biometric data? So yeah, I mean, I there is there are two angles to it. They have to innovate, and they notice that this is the direction the industry is going, particularly with Apple Pay becoming increasingly a threat. They have to enhance their models. I think they're at a disadvantage. I think biometric based payments will become prevalent, and it'll likely be very much tied to your smartphones. Apple Pay and all of those are good examples. So if anything, Google and Apple, possibly Samsung, have a better chance at succeeding and keeping the biometric data. The key is going to be biometric data not leaving the device. And as long as that happens, I think we should be, we should expect this to take off. And Apple certainly is doing a good job with it. Now the question is, will others try? Absolutely. Will they succeed? I doubt it. I don't think Visa or Mastercard will succeed with any of these. Interestingly, the way I actually think in this new world, their role will be diminished, increasingly diminished, because the days of charging 2%, 3% on a credit card transactions are long gone. And again, just like we said, the internet is going to be split, and the centralization of the payment networks themselves will be split. So we've seen that, right? With the Russian war, and Visa and Mastercard pulled out of Russia, so which means Russia has its own replaced it with its own system. China already has its own system. India has RuPay, which is pretty much, I think, 50-60% of India's transactions go through RuPay, that competes with Visa and Mastercard. So in fact, these guys are charging 1 or 2%. In India, it's more like 0.1% or some such thing.
I think Visa and Mastercard filed a suit in India too against the RuPay thing. Like there was a
RuPay thing, because they're cutting their margins and the future is intact. So if anything, I don't see a bright future for Mastercard and Visa. They are going to be on a decline, and they have built a moat around it and whatnot. But between these newer technologies like RuPay, remember, if India and China are not default on Mastercard and Visa, that's about 1/3 of the population, as we discussed earlier, are not using them. And it is only now, I think India started expanding their presence into selling that RuPay as a model to other countries as well. So it's a matter of time before they expand. But coming back to this point, Mastercard and Visa are kind of being attacked on two sides. One is the concept like RuPay and all of those on one side. The other is the end user payment providers, end payment providers like the smartphone providers like Google Pay, Apple Pay. Between these two models, Mastercard and Visa are being squeezed, and they're going to be, peer-to-peer coming up, where you paying a fellow Android user or a fellow iPhone users, and completely skipping the Mastercard or a Visa network, and that is a big deal. All these innovations are good. On the privacy side, can you trust them? Would you? How many people do you trust? How many companies do you trust? So, I won't certainly won't trust Visa or Mastercard on this front, especially if they're maintaining something in a network. But if they're doing it on the device, then you might as well go with a device provider like an Apple or an Android.
The transaction thing is, even like just earlier this week, we were in New York, and one of the guys was getting a water bottle from like the kebab guy on the street, like the little carts or whatever, right? So he grabs a water bottle, tries to pay with his credit card, and the guy's like, "You don't have cash?" And he's like, "No, like all I have is a card." So he pays with the card. The guy obviously like gives like that kind of a face that he's not happy about it. He's like, "What?" And the guy turns to me and goes, "What's his problem?" And I was like, that guy just like, you bought a bottle of water for $1 and he just lost 30 cents of it. Like, you're the problem. Like, he's better off not selling you the water bottle basically at that point. But he doesn't want. I was like, he's doing you a favor by selling it to you. And he was like, "Oh man, like I didn't know." And then he was like, "Next time I'll just ask him if they want to like take a Venmo or something." And I'm like, "Yeah, like that peer-to-peer payment is gonna go up over these kinds of transactions because it makes it well. Because even in India, when you travel, like you'll find like the guy selling chai on the street will take, scan his QR code and you pay the guy. And it's just like so easy and fast, and there's no MasterCard involved. And, I would say it opens up accessibility for a lot of people and also just decreases the fee because there's nothing really charged there. So yeah, you're right. I mean, these guys are going to have to find some way to figure it out, or maybe they'll just end up being a financial data broker company and focus on that side rather than financial transactions, right? Wouldn't be surprising to see that kind of a pivot.
I'm still stuck on, the whole the facial recognition thing it just feels like it's a runaway train at this point. How many weeks in a row have we talked about something around facial recognition? At least this time, Clearview isn't showing up, which I'm kind of surprised.
So what if I told you they were in partnership?
I would believe you. But it feels like, we as consumers have less control over our faces. Maybe that's a good reason for continuing to wear masks or something, because it feels like, now, anywhere you walk, there's probably, and if you go into a store, oh, well, they're getting your face. If you, go over, almost go anywhere, there's probably somebody getting a pic of your face. Yeah. And that, to me, I mean, I know this is a little beyond the scope of this particular article, but it just feels like now everybody's scheming on how to get a picture of you, how to get an image of your face. And then, what happens once that they've got the image? Well, now they're going off to, go almost sort of like a shout out to the Apple commercial that just came out. As soon as they get their inventory of facial pics, now they can go, do their own auction. Maybe they'll have an eBay auction. I don't know, but it just feels like we're already struggling with, more text-based, data and digital interactions. And now every week there's something going on with your face.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw actually in, Google I/O's last announcement or presentation earlier this week or last week, whenever it was, they had like I think the Nest Hub, whatever, smart home device they have that has a screen and speakers and you can ask it to do whatever. Basically, they made it so you don't have to say like the wake word every single time. And instead, as long as you just look at the device and make eye contact, then you can say like, what's the weather, or what time is it, or how many ounces are in a.
So we don't have to say cheese anymore. We just look at it.
Yeah, you just literally like from across the room. I think the demo was like the lady was cooking and she just looked at the thing and said how many ounces are in whatever and something like that. And then it spit out the answer. And so obviously that thing it knows your current face. It knows when you've made eye contact, just like Face ID does on your phone. But in this case, it's now outside of the phone. And chances are that information is definitely leaving that device. It's not staying on the device like an iPhone Face ID does, at least.
So the thing that feature that automatically, or you don't have to say the big word, it means it's listening all the time. So in the name of that convenience, you're giving up your privacy.
Now the camera's on all the time too, right? Because it has to know when you're looking at it.
Exactly. So it's monitoring constantly, maintaining a copy of your recording, at least most recent piece, and who knows what it's doing. Yeah, you got to give it to them. Yeah, it's always
you really do have to give it to them. They're going to take it anyway, right?
As a business, it's always good to bet on laziness. Yeah. And that's because the wake word is even that is too much. They're trying to
friction.
How do you reduce the friction? Well, record everything. People are willing to give up for that additional convenience of or inconvenience of saying that extra wake word. Sad, but that's the reality.
But the funny part is, all right, so you give up the wake word, and then you start looking at it intensely, and then all of a sudden, are you happy? Are you sad? So now they're able to tie your emotion to what to the expression on your face, and now that becomes even more potential sales. It never ends with this stuff, man. It's just amazing.
You look tired. You want a massage appointment?
Yeah, exactly.
It's coming.
All right. Well, I guess that Google thing was a good segue. Unless you got more, Roger.
I actually forgot what we were talking about.
Either way, we're talking about Google now. So the Wall Street Journal had this article. I wasn't a fan of the title really, but GOP-led legislation would force breakup of Google's ad business. It made it seem like it was, a Republican thing, but the next paragraph said co-sponsored by 2 Democrats as well. So I wasn't really sure why the title was like slanted that way. The title could have been bill introduced to help protect people from getting gouged by Google, but I don't know, maybe that wouldn't have sold as well.
That wouldn't have got as many clicks and eyeballs, man. Come on,
But Basically, I mean, it's fairly targeted at Google, just based on this paragraph here. The Competition and Transparency in Digital Advertising Act would prohibit companies processing more than 20 billion in digital ad transactions annually from participating in more than one part of the digital advertising ecosystem. 20 billion, pretty high bar. I would say if a company is making 20 billion in this, like, there's only a few that basically it applies to without naming names. But it goes on to say basically when you have Google simultaneously serving as a seller and a buyer, and running an exchange, that gives an unfair, undue advantage in the marketplace. One that doesn't necessarily reflect the values that they are providing. When a company can wear all those hats simultaneously, it can engage in conduct that harms everybody. I think I don't know if these guys just figured this out or what, but yeah, it's obviously pretty bad when Google sells ads and then they run ads on their own things. So if you search for Gmail, the first thing you get is an ad for Gmail on Google search. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but whatever. But yeah, I mean, overall, like selling ads, being the exchange itself, and being able to have your own ads on the platform seems obviously a little conflict of interest like. But I'm sure Roger, you probably got to have some pretty good thoughts on this one.
I mean, you have to ask the fundamental question: is Google a monopoly? I think it's absolutely no question about that, and monopoly in multiple areas, but in ads, definitely. Try to do any campaign without involving Google, and it's almost impossible. That you really have to cross some hoops to do any campaign that is outside of Google. So there is
Hmm.
definitely a monopoly. Do they play unfairly? Absolutely, no question about that. Let me give you an example. At least in the past, I've had this experience where you try to run a campaign on Google using their own, or at least try to run a campaign on Google against Google products. They'll say, yeah, you cannot advertise on our trademark. But then what they do allow is they can advertise on your trademark. I've seen Google do ads on their competitor, and Google ads will show up and on their competitors' keywords that are trademarks. And how is that possible? How should that even be allowed when you cannot advertise on Google's keywords and Google's trademarks? And Google should not be advertising on their platform, on their marketplace, against their competitor, which is a trademark keyword. And Google has done that in the past. And and then there's a third angle to it where it's, I don't know what percentage, but certainly a percentage of Google or percentage of money Google makes through the marketplace is purely based on trademarks, and where competitors basically bid out for other their competitors. A company, you can list maybe 10 competitors, and you can go and target those competitors and try to run ads against that competitor, even though their name is trademark, except unless that is Google, everything else is in there because Google is the one that is making money, is the middleman that is collecting the toll across the board. So a combination of them being a monopoly and then collecting the toll on everyone's trademarks except them doesn't sound right to me. So should someone look into it? Yeah, they should have looked into it, maybe 10 years back, but better late than never. I'm glad they're looking into it now.
Well, they're just looking into it now. How long is it going to actually take for, do you think, for something to actually be done?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there is a good consensus on both sides, and hopefully this will pass. But there is a lot of abuse at this point in the name of because of monopoly, and things like double click shouldn't be allowed in the first place. The acquisition shouldn't be allowed in the first place, but they are, and I think that has to be separated. And I think Google is also not just on the ad network, not just on the search ads, not just on the display ads. Google is also getting into offline inventory, again, offline inventory, and should be allowed when you have monopoly online. So these are all the things that have to be closely looked at, and yeah, there is a clear monopoly, and clearly that has to you know, be in control.
I was thinking about what we talked about last week. There was, just imagine if Flock, I guess, had actually picked up speed and folks adopted that. Now they're going with Fledge and Topics. What if one of the kind of purely led Google initiatives for replacing the third-party cookies that they're deprecating next year? How does that add to the equation of monopoly? It feels to me like if they already are at there now, what is that? How does the opportunity for them to put their own replacement thing in there?
Frankly, cookies don't do anything for Google. They have a lot efficient way of getting more information because they have analytics and tag manager embedded in 50, 60, 70% of the websites. That's one.
Plus, you're using the browser.
Actually, and yeah, and the browser is the main thing. You don't have to embed anything as long as you're using the browser. These are all the additional things. You just use the browser and they get to know everything, right? So cookies is just the low-hanging thing, and they know they'll be fine without cookies. So that only means we are just catching up to this, and then Google knows that we are 15 years behind their tech. Yeah. All the PhDs and all the brains are working towards how to cheat people and how to track people, right?
How to get more clicks.
Exactly. So I think that is the sad thing. But one thing I noticed, zooming out a little bit, Google in 2005, if you ask me, 2008, I used to have high respect for Google. Then I respected Google when it was a technology company. Now we're talking about Google, the ad company. The transition from technology to an ad company comes with a significant cost, and no matter how much good they do, it's impossible to go back to that position. So Google will likely do well fine, but in the long run, will Google do fine, say 20 years from now, 10 years from now? Absolutely not, because the trust is lost, and majority of the revenue is coming through that. You can't say that with some of the other companies. So longevity matters. That's why I don't see a lot of longevity for companies that are in the business of abusing users. So I would put Facebook, Google in that model. On the other hand, companies like Microsoft has that longevity. I mean, Microsoft is going 47 years now, and going strong. So I don't think Google will have anywhere close to that longevity because they burned the goodwill in the process.
Yeah, I'd say they burned it pretty fast because Microsoft took a while, and the goodwill that Microsoft lost was not something that like maybe normal consumers really ever felt, and so it was insulated a little bit. But here it is like the end user, the consumer, the normal everyday person that does feel a lot of that pain, or at least like lose that exposure in terms of privacy and everything like that, more so than some bundling of software and anti-competitive practices for businesses. Not to like downplay what Microsoft history is, but like it's just one hits a little bit closer to home than the other.
At least in Microsoft's case, they were offering products that the consumers are willing to pay. In this case, the consumer is the product. So there is a big difference between the two. It's easy to gain back trust when you fix those core issues, and Microsoft certainly did.
Right. Well, speaking of cores, actually, that's quite the segue to the next one because there's a story about cheesemakers embedding tiny trackers in the rind to find cheese fraud. I did not think we would ever be speaking about this topic, but it was the weirdest article to come from Food and Wine website. But basically, they've used codes for a couple decades. But my favorite quote of this entire thing, I just have to read this out loud. The innovation combines food-safe casein labels with the P-chip microtransponder, a blockchain crypto anchor that creates a digital twin for physical items. This scannable new food tag is smaller than a grain of salt and highly durable, delivering next-generation visibility and traceability. Wow. Okay, so you got a blockchain crypto anchor in here. You have a sensor that's smaller than a grain of salt that can easily be embedded into basically anything at this point now, to be tracked. maybe this is probably not a great thing. I don't know how much cheese fraud is happening in the world for them to invest in this. And also, what is cheese fraud? Is it just other people making more cheese or like replicating cheese? Or is it like the cheese packets are upset with like the shakers and like the fresh cheese? I don't really know, but this is just a lot in one place of a weird story that just did not make a lot of sense overall. Any deep thoughts on this one?
I think the Parmesan Giano, I watched a few things on this. I think it is a specific type of cheese that is made in a specific area in a specific process, and there is a way the cows are fed, and it is yeah, and I think it comes from Italy. So they want to protect that, and that brand is valuable for them, and they've been doing it for a long time. And I can see them trying to protect it because everyone, and I also know that the market that abuses it, so using the brand is several times more than the original. So that the privacy in this case is piracy in this case is much higher than the original. So that explains why they are trying to do some of this.
I'm yeah, I'm kind of. Is this like the colonel trying to protect the 11 herbs and spices recipe and making sure that nobody else has it? And so this is really a lot when you think about cheese, but I guess that's where we're going. I just usually go to the Subway and ask for a slice of American, but that's just me. But yeah, this stuff has got to be big business, and like you say, there. I just don't like micro transponders on my cheese or close to my cheese. But apparently,
So
this is the world we're living in. It's got to be
So
like this.
does the micro transponders transmit the location?
The article itself wasn't super clear on this. I wasn't sure how they were actually doing the tracking. But basically, it had to do with like um, the transponder has like these like what do you call it? It embeds like a couple different codes. I think it's like a 2D, 3D, and some like matrix codes or something along these lines. And it's like a digital tag. I thought it was kind of similar to maybe something along the lines of like RFID tags to like be relatable, but it wasn't super clear of exactly how these guys find out where things are or what is like fraudulently created. Yeah,
I
I don't know.
I think yeah, it is a chip. I think it's on their website. I think pchip.com,
Mm.
and their tagline is track anything, anywhere.
Oh God.
Wasn't that Apple's for their whatever that little device that you love so much, Raju? Isn't that the same?
AirTag. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is more
there.
like a AirTag for everything. That is the size of a grain of a salt.
Yeah.
Now they're thinking about embedding this in cheese and digestible. I'm curious when it will stop transmitting. If it is after you eat it, post digestion.
Does it track everywhere it goes and how long it's there and when it leaves? It's
It says that it is durable.
Yeah.
oh my
Durable
god.
is could mean a lot of things.
So for
Yeah.
every block of cheese that is in that image, one of these little transponders gets placed into it somehow or a label, and
Yeah, I mean they're
it's able to track each and every one. So if you want to know where this one went, it can pull it up and you can and they can see it. That's wow.
I'm actually worried about the technology. I really don't want the technology to take off. You know what they're saying on their website? If you look at their website, they say you can embed this in every single tablet that you take, right? And so you're basically swallowing a microchip, and they want to track and transmit that, and that can be good. And they do track everything and everywhere. I guess you visit the website and you see a bunch of trackers on their website. It starts there, and then keeps going.
I mean the
So
PChip website, like you said, Raju, it's wild. It says record chain of custody. So pinpoint last and current location, record time of transfers, confirm current owners, and then you can validate authenticity. I'm not even going to get into that. And then serialize and secure the supply chain. And I mean, it's all about monitoring and tracking. So yeah, I would imagine this thing can last for quite some time.
Did you say confirm current owners?
Yes. Confirm current owners. Record chain of custody.
No. I prefer my cheese to be with no micro transponders, please.
If this takes off, and the implications are humongous, because this is essentially a tag for everything, for anything and everything, and we are likely going to be hearing a lot about them in the future, if the tech works, and there are enough companies out there who want to abuse everything.
Well, once again, another cheery ending to one episode.
Oh, we have a happier
Cheesy
story. I mean,
ending.
yeah, cheese. Oh God, Roger.
Now I got to take cheese out of my diet.
Yeah. Well, I'll think twice next time we get a box or a bag of this special Parmesan. All right, cool. Well, I guess we'll wrap here. See y'all next week. Thanks again, Brent.
Wait a minute.
Raji.
Don't you got to do a pitch? You do a little promotion there?
Oh, is there a promotion? I don't know. I've gotten rusty
come on, man.
after you miss a week.
You're a little rusty.
So follow us on Twitter. Obviously, we'll be posting a lot of content there. Like, share, subscribe on YouTube, because that's the thing to do. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really, the content is there. If you're already watching, you're probably already subscribed. And if you're catching us for the first time, then hopefully you made it to the end of the video this time. Let's see. Maybe I can throw some exit music up. Oh, was that a comment that was thrown on the screen? Was that interesting? Do we want to see it? Do we not want to see it?
I didn't actually see it.
P-chip, the innovation that combined. Oh, I don't know. No, I don't want to see it. All right, fellas. I will see y'all next week. Thanks again. And Brent, looking forward to the next Hawaiian shirt.
And the next Ram hat, too, by the way.
All right. Bye, guys.